The fall of a great man rarely begins with a loud decision. It begins with a quiet compromise. One moment you are standing firm, clear-minded, walking with purpose. The next, something shifts. Not dramatically, not visibly, just a small adjustment in direction. A conversation that felt harmless. A connection that seemed innocent. A feeling you told yourself you could control. And that is exactly how one of the wisest men who ever lived lost everything. Solomon was not ordinary. Scripture tells us that God himself gave him wisdom beyond measure. Kings traveled across nations just to hear him speak. His judgment was unmatched. His understanding was deep. If wisdom alone could protect a man, Solomon would have been untouchable. But he was not. Because wisdom without discipline is fragile, and knowledge without obedience is dangerous. The same man who wrote about guarding the heart eventually stopped guarding his own. And it did not happen overnight. It happened through relationships. Wrong connections, wrong influences, wrong attachments that slowly, quietly, persistently pulled his heart away from God. Not through force, not through rebellion at first, but through subtle compromise that grew stronger over time. And here is the part that should make you pause. If it could happen to Solomon, it can happen to anyone. Not just the weak, not just the careless, even the wise. Especially the wise who think they are immune. Because the enemy rarely attacks your strength directly. He studies your blind spots. He looks for emotional gaps. Loneliness, ego, desire, the need to feel valued, the need to feel seen. And then he sends the right distraction at the wrong time. Wrapped in beauty, wrapped in kindness, wrapped in understanding, but leading somewhere you never intended to go. This is not about fear. This is about awareness. Because Scripture does not stay silent about these patterns. It speaks clearly, directly, sometimes even harshly, not to shame, not to condemn, but to protect. There are certain types of relationships that do not just slow your growth. They redirect your destiny. They pull your focus away from God. They weaken your spiritual authority. They fracture your purpose. And many men do not recognize them until damage has already been done. So the real question is not whether these influences exist. The question is whether you can recognize them before they reshape your life. Because what you allow into your heart will eventually lead your life. And what you ignore today may define your future tomorrow. Let us step into what Scripture actually reveals. Not culture, not emotion, not opinion. Truth. The first warning Scripture gives is about the adulterous woman. And notice something important. The danger does not begin with appearance. It begins with words. Proverbs describes her speech as smooth, sweet, persuasive, almost irresistible. She knows how to say exactly what you need to hear at exactly the right moment. That is the trap. Because temptation rarely presents itself as destruction. It presents itself as comfort. She listens when no one else does. She affirms when you feel overlooked. She creates a space where you feel understood. And slowly, what started as conversation becomes attachment. But Scripture reveals the ending clearly. Bitterness, destruction, Spiritual death. This is not exaggeration. It is warning. A woman who is already committed and still pursuing emotional or physical closeness with you is not a blessing. She is a test of your discipline. And failing that test never stays hidden. It affects your integrity, your future, your relationship with God. Then comes the second type, the quarrelsome woman. This is not about disagreement. Healthy relationships require honest conversation. This is about constant conflict. Drama becomes her environment. Peace becomes temporary. Tension becomes normal. Scripture goes as far as saying it is better to live alone in discomfort than to live in constant strife. That is strong language. Why? Because a man called to lead cannot build stability on chaos. If every conversation turns into conflict, if every situation escalates into tension, your spiritual focus begins to fracture. You become reactive instead of intentional. Your energy shifts from purpose to survival. And over time, that erosion affects everything. Your leadership weakens. Your clarity fades. Your peace disappears. A home is meant to be a place of restoration, not a battlefield. So the question becomes direct. Are you building with peace? Or are you surviving in constant tension? Because what feels normal today may slowly be destroying your future. The third warning is one that many ignore. The unbeliever. This is where emotion often overrides wisdom. She is kind. She is respectful. She treats you well. And you begin to believe that those qualities are enough. But Scripture does not measure relationships by comfort alone. It measures direction. Being unequally yoked is not about personality differences. It is about spiritual alignment. A yoke connects two beings moving forward together. If one is moving toward God and the other is moving toward the world, tension is inevitable. And eventually, something has to give. Either your conviction weakens, or the relationship breaks. Many men convince themselves they can lead the other person toward faith. But the reality is often the opposite. Slow compromise begins. Small adjustments. Less conviction. Less discipline. Less time with God. Until one day, the direction has completely shifted. Not because of one decision, but because of many small ones. Then comes the seductress. This is not always obvious. She does not always appear as danger. Sometimes she appears as opportunity, excitement, escape. She knows how to create an atmosphere that feels irresistible. She speaks to desire. She feeds ego. She creates the illusion of control. But Scripture compares the man who follows her to an animal walking toward destruction without awareness. That is the danger. Not knowing, not realizing, not seeing the outcome until it is too late. Temptation is powerful because it hides consequences. It magnifies pleasure and minimizes cost. But reality always catches up. And when it does, the price is higher than expected. The final warning is the proud woman who rejects wisdom. This is subtle but extremely dangerous. Because outwardly, everything may appear attractive. beauty, confidence, presence. But internally, there is resistance. Correction is dismissed. Truth is ignored. Growth is not desired. And that creates a serious problem. Because a relationship without humility cannot grow. It can only repeat patterns. Scripture makes a striking comparison. Beauty without wisdom is like a valuable object placed in the wrong setting. It looks impressive at first glance, but it lacks purpose. It lacks foundation. And eventually, it becomes a liability. A partner should strengthen your walk with God, not compete with it, not weaken it, not distract from it, because your calling requires alignment, and alignment requires humility. This is why Scripture emphasizes finding, not settling. Finding requires patience, discernment, prayer. It requires seeing beyond surface qualities, beyond attraction, beyond temporary emotion, and choosing based on truth, not impulse. Now here is where this becomes personal. If you are already in a difficult situation, the answer is not panic. It is clarity. It is surrender. It is bringing the situation before God honestly, seeking wise counsel, not isolating, not pretending, because transformation begins with truth, and decisions guided by the Spirit always lead to better outcomes than decisions driven by emotion. So ask yourself, are you choosing based on purpose or reacting based on feeling? Because that difference shapes everything. At the center of all these warnings is not fear. It is protection. God does not restrict to control you. He guides to preserve you. Every instruction in Scripture carries intention. Not to limit your life, but to secure your future. Because relationships are not neutral. They either strengthen your direction or slowly redirect it. There is no middle ground. And the longer something remains unchecked, the stronger its influence becomes. That is why awareness matters. Discernment matters. Obedience matters. Not in theory, but in daily decisions. Who you listen to, who you allow close, who you build with, because those choices shape your identity over time. Not instantly, but consistently. And consistency is what defines destiny. So do not rush. Do not ignore warning signs. Do not allow loneliness to make decisions that wisdom would never approve. Bring everything to God first, not last. Seek counsel. Stay grounded in truth. And trust that the right path, even if slower, always leads to something stronger. Because a life built with God does not just survive. It stands firm, clear, unshaken. And that is the kind of life worth building.